These things are just supposed to be creepy. And when we get a 10-minute segment of them having a f***ing slumber party with this kid, all of the terror goes out the window, and now I'm almost as annoyed as I was when She-Hulk was released. Yeah, it was that f***ing bad. Hi y'all, SnarkyJay cosplay here. Yes, before you start asking questions, I'm going to do this entire video in a half-assed Foxy cosplay. Just leave me alone about it, we're doing it. Anyways, I was over in Washington State for a convention when Five Nights at Freddy's was released, so my best friend and I decided to wait until Halloween. And for context, my best friend and I actually played the first two games sort of religiously when they came out. I kind of got lost in the lore and I never played the rest of them, but the first two took up the better part of my entire late middle school experience. Like, we were deeply embedded in Five Nights at Freddy's. And when I say deeply embedded, I mean that I'm too chicken shit to play horror games, so I would sit behind the computer and just tell him what to do. I'm actually still terrified by Five Nights at Freddy's. I cannot play it by myself. And that's what I was expecting from this movie. And if you've already seen it, you know that that's really not what we get here. As much as I'd like to say otherwise, I thought Five Nights at Freddy's as a movie was a complete f***ing dumpster fire, and the best I can give it is a 3 out of 10. Now, I know that sounds super harsh, but I have my reasons. While the movie actually did get off to an interesting start, I don't think this is a particularly good movie. Five Nights at Freddy's or not, it's just not a good horror film. It's not a good comedy horror film. It kind of just is garbage. What I did like will take about 45 seconds to go over, so let's get that out of the way. I loved what the animatronics looked like. I think they looked absolutely fantastic. They looked very much like they were pulled from the first game and brought to real life. And it was definitely a little eerie, feeling like these 8th grade nightmares for me really came to life and were on the big screen. And I also really like the design of the set itself. The entirety of Freddy Fazbear's Pizzeria feels super legit, very 80s, but also really realistic. I spent a lot of my weekends in a spot called Dandy Bear when I was a kid. Yeah, and it honestly reminded me a lot of my childhood in that sense, so it felt very true to the game, and I really liked that about it. And that's basically all the positives I have. Now, the Five Nights at Freddy's movie has a couple of huge issues, and the first is that while there are some moments that feel like it could be creepy, it's really not a scary movie. Now, I can acknowledge that I think that the entirety of the movie is very much handicapped by the fact that it has to be PG-13. After all, a lot of the creepy shit and gore that they could have given us, they were basically unable to because they had to be able to give it to this younger audience, and I'm not too obtuse to realize that 13-year-olds are basically the target audience for Five Nights at Freddy's games now. I think I was about 13 when the first one came out. I'm 23 now, so I'm really not who they're targeting with this movie or the games anymore. Just because I went to watch it doesn't mean it was meant for me. I can also acknowledge that they couldn't make it exactly like the first game, right? The first game, you're literally just in a security room clicking between cameras and opening and closing a door and looking in vents. That's basically it. So I get that they really couldn't do that. However, this leads me to the biggest problem with the Five Nights at Freddy's movie, is that it's really hard to make Five Nights at Freddy's as a concept into a scary movie. Honestly, the scariest parts about Five Nights at Freddy's are the things that you don't see. It's an incredibly claustrophobic game, and there's really nothing you can do to defend yourself. You're never actually seeing the animatronics coming at you, except for Foxy's running animation in the first game. You're kind of just clicking through cameras and following a move pattern, which really adds hype for that paranoia type feeling that the game creates as you go through each night. But there are plenty man versus all survival type horror games, so I really don't think it would have been that hard for them to do that with this movie as opposed to whatever the hell it is you want to call what we actually got. Honestly, one of my major gripes with this film is that it's just not well written. You consider the fact that if somebody told you, hey, the animatronics at the job you're at, they're haunted by a bunch of dead kids that like died in the 80s because they were murdered mysteriously, would you go like, yeah, that sounds normal? But that's exactly what happens. This is all explained to Mike, the security guard, and he literally just like, yep, that makes sense. That is f***ing awful. Everything in this movie just wraps up entirely too neatly for any real tension to ever be created, because I think Like I said earlier, it was written for 13-year-olds. I also think that the way they included some of the limited lore in this movie really didn't do it any favors. In the first Five Nights at Freddy's game, you really don't get any lore at all. You don't get a story, you're just trapped in this small space while these things try to kill you for a reason you don't really get. Through the main character, Mike, the security guard's little sister Abby, they make an attempt to humanize the animatronics. And yes, the story of the kids murdered and trapped in the animatronics is very sad. I think it's awful. I think it's great lore. These things are just supposed to be creepy. And when we get a 10-minute segment of them having a f***ing slumber party with this kid, all the terror goes out the window, and now I'm almost as annoyed as I was when She-Hulk was released. Yeah, it was that f***ing bad. I don't want the animatronics painted into a picture of sympathy. What I need is to be terrified. And I was at no point terrified. The kill count in this movie is incredibly low. I think it's like 3 or 4, and the end absolutely took me out. If you don't want major spoilers, I guess don't finish watching this video, but the fact that William Afton comes back, and yes, he is Springtrap, and then the animatronics band together to fight off Springtrap and imprison him forever, that to me felt almost as f***ing dumb. Actually, no, it felt worse than when all the kids, the Losers Club in the 2017 It movie band against Pennywise, and they all just took turns bullying him to death. That shit was so dumb, and that's exactly what this film felt like. To me, at no point did I feel like the animatronics were ever as scary as they were in the first game. And again, I'm still too chicken shit to play the game, so you can't say, Jay, you've obviously matured too much to really be afraid of these things anymore. I literally went to watch this film in fox ears and vampire teeth at a public movie theater. I'm not too mature for anything. I went to watch the movie with my best friend who introduced me to the games and his wife, and they actually both really liked the movie. Like, they genuinely enjoyed it and were shocked by my reaction when at the end of it I was like, no, this is dog shit. So could this be a tale of SnarkyJay once again being an overly critical pain in the ass on her YouTube channel? Yes. I'm glad it's making money, and I'm sure it'll spout a new franchise for kids to enjoy, and maybe that's it. Maybe if I wanted to enjoy Five Nights at Freddy's, I should have just been 13 years old. If I'd seen it as a kid, I might have liked it more, but I can't give Five Nights at Freddy's any more than a 3 out of 10. As much as I tried to enjoy it, it genuinely was a huge flop for me. Unfortunately, it just wasn't for me. Now, I was definitely expecting a lot more. There's really good horror movies that are really creepy and they're still PG-13. This just wasn't one of them. And that's all from me. I've been SnarkyJay. Thank you so much for watching. Please don't forget to like and subscribe. For more SnarkyJay, be sure to check out my Instagram, and if you'd like to support my content creation and get some very nice photo shoot sets in the process, feel free to check out my Patreon. I will link both in the description below, and let me know your thoughts on the Five Nights at Freddy's movie in the comments below.